Ready to unpack some really fascinating sources, pull out those potent insights, and hopefully offer you a bit of a unique perspective on the world around us.
Absolutely. And today we're jumping into something pretty profound, I think. A question that maybe feels quite relevant right now.
Which is really complex machine, right?
Okay.
And instead of some big dramatic breakdowns, I'm going to just start, I don't know, carefully putting tiny grains of sand in the gears.
Right. Or maybe it's like a constant whisper, something you barely notice, but it slowly reshapes how everyone sees things.
Exactly. Until the whole foundation just crumbles, but from the inside out.
That's the kind of unraveling we're looking at today, this quiet, almost unseen power kind of taking hold.
Yeah, so this deep dive, it isn't just about, the big flashy historical events, the revolutions or wars you see in movies, or this really unnerving interplay between, like, systemic inefficiencies, maybe our own unwitting complicity in it all,
Mm-hmm.
and the incredible power of our own internal understanding. What some older traditions call gnosis, right?
Yeah.
Inner knowing.
Gnosis, yeah. That deep, often subconscious conviction that really shapes our reality. So, our mission for you today, listening in, is to pull out insights that help you see how power really operates.
Especially in its subtle forms.
Exactly, the sneaky ways. And maybe most importantly, how your own mind, your own beliefs are central to either challenging that power or, well, maybe inadvertently propping it up.
Yeah, get ready for maybe a few aha moments, things that might shift how you see society and maybe your own role in it.
We've got a really diverse set of sources lined up, everything from uh, old resistance manuals, cybernetics,
Stafford Baird.
media theory, McLuhan, psychology, Jung, Maltz,
Yeah.
even the kind of hidden mechanics of our financial systems. Richard Werner's work on that is fascinating.
It's a real journey into, well, the echoes of the unseen. Okay, let's unpack this first part. We're starting with this really compelling idea drawn from historical resistance stuff. What if the biggest empires, the most powerful systems, what if they aren't brought down by massive armies or, huge battles?
What if it's quieter?
What if it's actually like millions of tiny, almost invisible acts of defiance? The source material uses phrases like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Or 1,000 slightly misplaced wrenches. I like that one. Just tiny things that slowly but surely grind a massive machine to a halt.
It sounds almost too simple. Like, could that really work against a huge, powerful system?
Well, history suggests it's remarkably effective precisely because it's deceptive. This comes straight out of historical resistance materials, specifically the OSS, that's the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA.
Right, World War II era.
Exactly. Their simple sabotage field manual. It literally says, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, acts of simple sabotage multiplied by thousands of citizen saboteurs can be an effective weapon.
Thousands. So volume is key.
Volume, and the genius of it is the low effort, low risk for the person doing it. Makes it incredibly hard to detect. It maximizes subtlety. You don't need to be some kind of master spy.
You just need to be, what, a slightly uncooperative cog?
Pretty much. A slightly clumsy or maybe just slow cog in a giant machine.
So it's about making these acts look natural, almost accidental, blending in.
Exactly, blending into the everyday inefficiency, the messiness that's already there in any big organization. Think of that tiny, constant leak in a pipe.
One drop is nothing.
But 1,000,000 drops over time empties the whole tank. It's not about obvious rebellion because that gets you caught, gets you shut down.
Right.
This is way more insidious. It's using the system's own weight, its own complexity against itself, forcing it to bane its own resources, dealing with these tiny, annoying problems.
And it's not just physical stuff, right?
Right.
There's a psychological element, too.
Oh, absolutely. A powerful psychological angle. It's not just about disrupting operations, it's about morale. Their morale, the system's operators, and actually the saboteurs' morale, too.
How so?
Well, the manual even suggests using humor. Humor relaxes fear, makes these little acts of defiance sustainable, easier to weave into just normal life.
Okay.
And if every mistake, every delay just looks like an ordinary screw-up, not deliberate sabotage,
Yeah.
the system itself starts to doubt its own competence. Trust breaks down internally. It just slowly suffocates in its own inefficiency.
Wow. So it becomes its own worst enemy, trapped in this spiral of doubt and screw-ups.
Precisely. Fueled by these subtle little nudges from thousands of people.
That's a really powerful image. Systems collapsing under their own weight. Okay, so how does this translate to, like, modern bureaucracy? We've all been there, right? Endless forms, jargon that makes no sense, processes designed to make you just give up.
The frustration is real.
Could those very tools, that mundane stuff, be turned back on the system? Can paperwork and rules become weapons?
Absolutely. Some of our sources, like texts on bureaucratic warfare, lay out these brilliant practical tactics. It's all about weaponizing the rules.
Okay, give me an example.
All right, imagine you get one of those super dense 20-page government documents full of legalese impossible to understand.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Your response isn't to yell or refuse. No, you play it polite, almost overly helpful. You write back something like, "Excuse me, I really want to ensure I comply perfectly here, but this is quite extensive. Could you possibly provide a concise, maybe 2-page summary, just outlining the key things I need to do specifically for someone in my category, preferably in plain language?"
Huh. So you're not refusing.
Not at all. You're just forcing them to do extra work, often redundant work, to clarify their own confusing instructions. You make their job harder without giving them any ammo to call you uncooperative.
Okay, I get it. It's not about a quick win, it's about attrition. Wearing them down, making them work for you. What else is in this bureaucratic warfare playbook?
Building on that, there's excessive detail and documentation, over-complying, but in a way that actually gums up the works.
How does that work?
Imagine you get a simple query, say, about your recycling bin. Instead of a quick answer, you attach like 17 supporting documents.
17. Like what?
Oh, a historical analysis of your household waste for the last decade, maybe some philosophical thoughts on municipal waste protocols, a detailed flowchart of your sorting process. You're being meticulously thorough, makes it really hard for them to say you're not cooperating, but you're just drowning them in mostly irrelevant, though technically provided information. It eats up their time, their resources.
Sand in the administrative gears, as the source says.
Exactly. Every letter they have to read, every rule they need to look up to justify their own process, every meeting they need to figure out your overly detailed query, it all slows things down.
I can feel the bureaucratic headache just thinking about it. And this isn't just paper, right? This applies to the digital world, too. Buggy websites, confusing online forms.
Oh, absolutely. The digital realm is ripe for this. You document every single error. Take screenshots, note the exact error codes, the timestamps, describe every illogical step on their website.
You basically become their unpaid, hypercritical beta tester.
Precisely. You force them to spend time and money fixing their shoddy work. And even better, if a digital tool is genuinely hard to use, raising accessibility complaints can trigger mandatory, often costly investigations. It all adds up.
Okay. In the physical world, slow down tactics.
Yep. The manual advises, when asked to perform a task, do so slowly, question everything, ask for instructions to be repeated, pretend you misunderstand, need more clarification, always more clarification.
You're using their own demand for compliance against them,
Mm-hmm.
stretching their resources, making them pay a price for every request.
Exactly. It erodes confidence, slows everything down.
It's fascinating, really, how these tiny acts can chip away at huge structures. But here's where it gets, really counterintuitive. There's this paradox, right? Sometimes trying too hard to make government efficient actually makes it more unstable, less safe.
It is a profound paradox. One source puts it starkly, something like, the most efficient government is a dictatorship. The most efficient economy is slavery.
Wow. Okay. That forces you to stop and think.
It really does. It means raw speed, hyper-efficiency in wielding power maybe shouldn't be the ultimate goal in a free society. In fact, a lot of those built-in inefficiencies, like in the U.S. Constitution, separated powers, checks and balances, federalism.
You're saying those aren't bugs, they're features.
They're absolutely features, deliberate, essential design choices. They're the necessary cost, you could say, of keeping power limited, distributed, accountable.
So they slow things down on purpose.
Yes. To force deliberation, encourage compromise, prevent abuses, they're safety mechanisms. Make the machine run slower, sure, but stop it from exploding from unchecked power.
So attempts to bypass those things for speed, broad executive orders or courts making new law.
They often backfire, big time. They lack legitimacy, they lead to gridlock, they erode public faith. Ironically, chasing that pure efficiency often creates more chaos and inefficiency in the long run, wastes way more resources.
And our complicity
Yeah.
that comes in when we accept the shortcuts, when we want that quick win, even if it weakens the system long term.
That's exactly it. Our silence, our passive acceptance becomes part of the erosion. We let those safeguards get chipped away. And Stafford Beer, the cybernetics guy, he adds another layer. He argues institutions, especially big bureaucracies, are dynamic, viable systems. And often their main output is just their own organization, meaning they're directed not primarily to our welfare, but to their own survival. They inherently resist fundamental change. They want to perpetuate themselves, keep their structure, rather than truly evolve or serve their main purpose.
So they become self-preserving entities.
Exactly. And that self-preservation instinct is a huge, often unseen barrier to real progress, a really subtle hand of control.
Okay, so we've got subtle sabotage, bureaucratic warfare, the paradox of efficiency, institutions just trying to survive. These are powerful external forces. But if we're talking unseen hands and shifting sands of belief, we absolutely have to get into money.
Ah, yes.
Because this is where things get really mind-bending for a lot of people, the way we usually think about money, often totally wrong compared to how it actually works. Our sources hammer this point. Money's value is fundamentally tied to trust and belief.
It's described almost as a charade, something that works only because we all believe it works, a metaphysics of belief.
It sounds so fragile when you put it like that.
It is, and grasping that fragility, that belief factor, is crucial. If that collective belief falters, the whole system can wobble.
And here's the really astonishing part, the bit that's often not in the textbooks.
Oh, what?
Commercial banks don't just lend out money that people have deposited. They actually create money out of nothing. Every time they issue a loan.
Wait, out of nothing. That sounds, counterintuitive is putting it mildly. How does that work?
It's actually simpler than it sounds mechanically, but the implications are huge. When a bank approves a loan, mortgage, business loan, whatever,
Okay.
it doesn't pull funds from someone else's savings account.
Yeah.
It just creates a new deposit for the borrower. That's a liability for the bank. And at the same time, it creates a new loan account, which is an asset for the bank. Boom. New money exists.
Just like that. A bookkeeping entry.
A bookkeeping entry that expands the bank's balance sheet and, crucially, increases the total money supply in the economy. Richard Werner's research, and this is backed up by central banks themselves, the Bank of England, the Fed, ECB, Bundesbank, they all acknowledge this, even though it's not common knowledge.
Right. Werner estimates 98% of our money is created this way by commercial banks, not governments printing presses.
Okay, just pause on that for a second. Let that sink in. If banks create almost all the money as loans, who's really in control? It feels like there's this huge illusion of control for most of us over the money we earn.
Because it's largely managed by and dependent on these institutions. And money itself, then, becomes, as one source puts it, strips of power that are only valuable because of the beliefs that they are.
This leads us to Richard Werner's work, right? The quantity theory of credit.
Exactly. It's groundbreaking because it splits this bank-created money, this credit, into two distinct streams. First, there's real circulation.
CR.
Real circulation. Yeah, this is credit used for productive investments. Things that actually create new goods, new services, contribute to GDP growth. Think building a new factory, funding R&D, creating real jobs.
Okay, so credit that builds the real economy, grows the pie.
Precisely. Werner argues this is the credit that determines actual nominal GDP growth.
Okay, so that's CR. What's the other stream?
The second is financial circulation, CF. This is credit used for, financial speculation, buying existing assets, real estate stocks, mergers and acquisitions, hedge fund stuff.
So it's not creating new stuff.
Yeah.
Just trading existing stuff.
Yeah.
Pushing prices up.
Largely, yes. It inflates asset prices, drives those bubbles. Werner argues a big rise in this financial credit, CF, pushes up asset prices, makes company balance sheets look great, creates this feeling of euphoria.
Which encourages even more lending for speculation.
Exactly, until it inevitably pops. Credit dries up, crunch time, bankruptcies, and you get the boom-bust cycles, the banking crises we keep seeing.
That makes so much sense of things like the 2008 housing crisis, the dot-com bubble.
Werner argues this unproductive credit creation is the main cause of the business cycle. It feeds these asset bubbles, leads to boom and bust, and, crucially, tends to concentrate wealth at the top during the busts.
Okay, so if banks create money and decide where it goes in real economy or a financial casino, what about the tools we usually hear about? Interest rates, government spending. Our sources say they're often ineffective.
Yeah, this is another big challenge to conventional thinking from Werner. Empirically, he shows interest rates don't lead economic growth, they follow it.
Wait, really? High growth leads to high rates, low growth to low rates, not the other way around.
That's what the data shows, according to Werner. The traditional story low rates stimulate growth, he argues, is kind of a theoretical construct, based on assumptions like perfect information that just don't hold up in the real world.
So why do central banks focus on interest rates so much?
Well, Werner suggests the interest rate focus allows central banks to claim they're neutral, independent, just setting the price of money, when in reality, by directing credit, they have immense power over where the money goes, which sector benefits, real or financial.
And government spending, fiscal policy. That doesn't work either.
Not on its own, according to this theory. If the government spends a lot, but there's no new credit creation flowing into the real economy, CR,
Yeah.
then it leads to complete quantity crowding out. The government spending just replaces private spending or investment that would have happened anyway. It shuffles resources around but doesn't actually grow the overall pie if productive credit isn't expanding.
So the banks hold the key through credit creation and allocation.
Werner argues central banks absolutely have the tools and the know-how to prevent bubbles. They used to guide credit, steering it away from speculation until the 70s or so. He claims their shift towards deregulation and focusing only on interest rates directly led to the more frequent, more intense crises we've seen since.
Wow. So this whole financial system, it really operates on this deep layer of belief, controlled by mechanisms most people don't even know exist.
A complex, unseen metaphysics of belief profoundly shaping our reality.
Okay, so we've mapped out some of these external systems, sabotage, bureaucracy, the very nature of money creation, huge forces. But now let's pivot inward to the inner landscape. Because what happens out there, it's deeply connected to what's happening inside us, especially, as our sources suggest, when nobody knows who they are.
This is where Marshall McLuhan comes in strong. His ideas about media, identity, they're incredibly relevant here. He talks about the discarnate man.
Discarnate, like without a body.
Essentially, yeah. McLuhan argues the effect of media, what he calls the hidden ground, is way more important than the actual content, the figure. Think about when you're on the phone or listening to radio, watching TV, or doom scrolling on your phone now.
Okay.
In that state, you don't have a body in the traditional grounded sense. You become this disembodied intelligence, a figure without a ground, detached from physical space.
So these technologies literally make us lose touch with our physical selves. We become like ghosts in the digital machine.
That's a good way to put it. The sheer speed of electric communication, the constant flood of information, it makes you feel outside of the natural scheme of things. You lose that sense of a private identity, a connection to natural law.
And this discarnate man, this electric man, what does that do to us?
Well, lacking that physical anchor, that spatial orientation, McLuhan argued it can lead to a detachment from traditional morals, a kind of moral anarchy. And because electronic media makes us feel involved in everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah, that fire hose of information.
It means no goals, no perspective, no position from which he can stand to look at events, no stable point of view. You're just swept along everywhere and nowhere simultaneously.
That sounds incredibly disorienting. And it really resonates with the feeling of the modern world, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe that explains, like, the massive nostalgia we see everywhere for old music, old clothes, simpler times.
McLuhan saw that nostalgia as an attempt to get back to the time when we had bodies and identities, an unconscious grasping for that lost sense of grounding. He even looked at things like youth fashion, the eclectic mix and match styles, or even phenomena like streakers back in the day.
Streakers? How do they fit in?
He saw them as expressions of grievance and anger, stemming from this deep existential lack of clear roles, jobs, and goals, in a world where traditional goals feel meaningless at the speed of light.
So when you're lost in this information overload, disconnected from your body, your identity dissolving, it creates this deep frustration.
A profound frustration, yeah. A feeling of being lost, adrift. And that feeling, that loss of identity, can manifest in some really destructive ways.
Which brings us to another really powerful, maybe unsettling idea from McLuhan. His definition of violence.
Yeah, this one really connects a lot of dots. He defines violence primarily as the form of the quest for identity.
Quest for identity.
He argues that when people, or even whole cultures, lose their sense of self or their image of themselves, it doesn't just make them sad or confused. It triggers this deep anger, this disturbance. And violence becomes a way, often unconscious, to try and reestablish who they are.
How? By, like, making an impact. Forcing a reaction.
Exactly. By bumping into other people, asserting a physical presence, demanding recognition in a world that feels increasingly unreal or ethereal. It's where the collective shadow, that hidden, unacknowledged part of us, starts to really show its teeth.
He uses the Western movie genre as an example. Right?
Brilliantly, yeah. He saw the Western as so significant because it perfectly captures this dynamic. Men on the frontier, he said, were often without neighborhoods, without identity. They had lost their old social structures,
So they had to constantly prove themselves.
had to prove they were men every day, through action, through confrontation, constantly asserting their existence. McLuhan saw this as a mirror for our own time. The speed of information, the disembodiment, the erosion of identity. It pushes us to seek identity through often abrasive encounters, whether online or off.
So violence isn't just about aggression or power. It's a desperate search for meaning, for self-definition when you feel like you have none.
It's the raw expression of an internal void. And it applies to groups, too. The loss of group identity can be a huge driver. He pointed to examples like the American South after the Civil War or Germany after World War I.
Times of massive upheaval and identity crisis.
Exactly, leading to this collective trauma, this desperate desire for recovery of identity, which sometimes turned violent as people searched for a new unifying story. He even made this provocative link between learning difficulties like dyslexia. He suggested, maybe controversially, that it might stem partly from a lack of certain physical eye exercises, made worse by passive TV watching. This physical issue, he thought, could lead to immense frustration, anger, and potentially violence as a reaction to feeling blocked, losing identity and agency.
Wow. So when nobody knows who they are, the search for self can become really destructive.
Internally and externally, yeah.
This really bridges nicely into Carl Jung's ideas. The collective unconscious, these powerful archetypes influencing our internal gnosis, our inner knowing.
Absolutely. Jung, especially in works like Aionen, talked about two layers of the unconscious, the personal one unique to us, and then this deeper universal layer, the collective unconscious.
Which contains the archetypes.
Exactly. The shadow, the hero, the mother, the trickster. These aren't things we learn. They're inherited psychic structures, primordial patterns, ways we're predisposed to see and react to the world. And Jung warned that some archetypes, like the shadow, the anima and animus, they have the most frequent and the most disturbing influence on the ego, can lead to tragic results.
And the really scary part is when one gets activated.
That's the key. When an archetype gets activated, Jung says it floods the ego with this incredibly strong feeling. It immediately fills the ego personality with an unshakable feeling of rightness and righteousness.
Unshakable. Even if it's totally irrational.
Totally. It feels undisputed and indisputable. It's that internal gnosis, that gut certainty that bypasses logic. And here's the kicker, the hypnotic part.
Yeah.
The real cause of that feeling, the activated archetype, usually gets projected onto something external, another person, a group, a situation. Our consciousness gets totally captivated, as if hypnotized by that external cause.
So that's why certain opinions, ideologies, conspiracy theories are so hard to challenge with facts or logic.
Exactly. The internal gnosis creates this self-reinforcing bubble, a psychological fortress. The person isn't just holding a belief. They are, in a sense, possessed by it. The conviction comes from way too deep to be touched by mere facts.
So our self-image, our internal beliefs aren't just reflecting reality. They're actively creating it. This sounds a lot like Maxwell Maltz and psychocybernetics.
It's the core idea. Maltz argued your self-image is the absolute key. It either lets you live without limits or imposes these deep artificial ones. And the mechanism is fascinating.
Which is?
Your nervous system, Maltz said, cannot tell the difference between an imagined experience and a real one. It reacts automatically to whatever you think or imagine to be true, regardless of objective reality.
The Mr. Russell story from the sources illustrates this powerfully, doesn't it?
It's chilling. A man believes he's cursed by voodoo. He's physically healthy, but he just deteriorates, ages overnight, mentally and physically wrecked.
Until the doctor tricks him.
Until a doctor convinces him the curse was false by showing him some harmless scar tissue, pretending it was the curse material, and boom, he rapidly recovers. His belief, whether objectively true or false, dictated his physical reality.
So our self-image is like this internal program, actively creating our reality. We're in a state of self-hypnosis, acting out the roles we believe we fit.
That's the power and the danger of it.
Okay, if our minds are that suggestible, that vulnerable to belief, how can this be exploited? How can powerful groups or entities manipulate our internal gnosis to control us, to get us to comply or be apathetic or divided without using any overt force?
It's a massive vulnerability. And it connects right back to that OSS manual advising saboteurs to feed the enemy wrong information. It wasn't just about disrupting logistics, it was about polluting their information stream, making them doubt themselves.
Making them doubt their own gnosis.
Exactly. Maltz talks about this inner dummy inside us, a part that just accepts things uncritically if they're presented convincingly enough. Think about how easily we can be bowled over by the chance remark of a friend.
Like, you look pale today, Bob.
And suddenly, Bob feels sick. Or one rejection makes someone believe they're fundamentally inferior. This is limbic hijacking, the emotional brain reacting instantly, negatively, bypassing rational thought, creating this automatic failure mechanism that reinforces negative beliefs.
So powerful entities can exploit this by feeding us specific narratives, designed to create a particular truth in our minds, even if it's totally false, programming our internal gnosis.
Precisely. To foster compliance, apathy, division, all without any need for overt force. It links to McLuhan's idea that the user is the content. What we internalize from media doesn't just inform us, it fundamentally shapes who we believe we are.
And we see this playing out right now, don't we? The sources mentioned, for instance, Donald Trump's attacks on the Smithsonian, on historical narratives.
Yeah, the MSNBC source we looked at frames his criticisms about discussing how bad slavery was, or LGBTQ plus history as part of a deeply white nationalist project.
So the argument is he's trying to reshape a national self-image, impose a simply more sanitized version of the past.
Yes. The source suggests he pushes a narrative where victory was secured in the founding, this static, idealized past. Rejecting the idea of a more perfect union that still needs work, still needs to confront its own difficult history.
Trying to suppress the uncomfortable stuff, the collective shadow.
That's the interpretation, suppressing truths that, if left unacknowledged, just fester. And his targeting of elite universities, diversity, museums, it taps into that sense of grievance, that perceived loss of traditional identity we talked about.
Channeling collective anxieties.
Exactly. Framing these institutions as places where so-called radical left-wing people thrive, people who supposedly look down upon his people, the true Americans. It resonates powerfully with that Jungian idea people gripped by an archetypal feeling of rightness, completely resistant to facts that contradict their internal gnosis. It's a stark example of manipulating that inner landscape for political gain.
Okay, this all just hammers home how crucial it is to reclaim our agency. If we want to navigate this erosion of identity, push back against these unseen forces, we need tools. Tools for clarity, for wholeness. It makes me think about ancient wisdom, like shamanism. The sources mention the therapy of the word.
It's a fascinating connection. Ancient healing practices, like those of witch doctors and shamans, understood the power of narrative, rhythm, ritual. They used spell casting, essentially artistic forms, to help people to get well.
So using words and art to heal.
Exactly. Even in classical antiquity, eloquence rhetoric was seen as having the power to heal sick minds. It was about wholeness, restoring balance. It ties into the idea of the logos, the divine word in Christianity, being therapeutic, especially when sung and performed richly.
It's about the holistic power of language, sound, art, to recohere a fragmented psyche.
Precisely. These traditions knew that narrative shapes reality, changed the story, changed the inner state.
And McLuhan brings this forward, calling artists and poets the antenna of the race. That's such a powerful image, picking up signals before anyone else.
Absolutely. He argued artists pick up the messages first, often decades before the mainstream catches on. They act as our means of orientation in a crazy world. They adjust their rhythms, anticipate future forms, future structures in society.
Like an early warning system.
He claimed they could provide at least a 30 years warning before major shifts become obvious to the establishment or bureaucracy, which is always looking backwards or just at the immediate. This artistic pattern recognition is vital for diagnosing that hidden ground, those underlying shifts in perception and identity that cause the problems. They show us what's coming.
And even humor has a role here, not just for laughs.
Not at all. Humor can be profoundly therapeutic. A cathartic or cure or therapy for grievance and misery, McLuhan said. Why? Because behind every joke is a grievance.
So the things we find funny often point to underlying frustrations or absurdities.
Think about political satire or jokes about bureaucracy. That laughter is a release, right? A shared recognition of a common frustration. It acknowledges the grievance in a non-destructive way.
It diffuses the tension.
It can. Understanding the grievances humor points to is key to cooling off collective anger, moving towards dialogue instead of just letting the pressure build towards violence.
This leads directly to actively challenging narratives, reclaiming what the sources call our intellectual sovereignty.
taking back control of our own minds.
Yes, and one source, Constitutional Disobedience, makes this bold claim. The duty of constitutional reading belongs to all citizens and cannot be delegated to experts or authorities.
Why is that so important?
Because if the meaning of our foundational laws is only accessible to a small group of experts, then real power shifts away from the people to an unelected elite. We lose control.
So what are the remedies? How do we reclaim that power?
First, linguistic honesty. Insist that words, especially in law, actually have stable meanings. They can't just mean whatever the powerful want them to mean. Push back against deliberate obfuscation, against verbal gymnastics.
Demand clarity. And second,
Constitutional literacy. We, as citizens, have to actually read the foundational documents ourselves. Directly engage with the source material. Don't just rely on summaries or someone else's interpretation.
do the homework ourselves.
Exactly. And third, interpretive disobedience. This isn't about violence. It's a principled refusal to accept interpretations that clearly twist or contradict the plain meaning of the text. It's an intellectual and civic resistance.
Refusing to swallow narratives that undermine the clear intent or the facts.
Precisely. And in the face of those attacks on historical narratives we mentioned, like targeting the Smithsonian for telling complex truths, the response has to be going to the institutions, reading the books, telling the truth in every form possible.
Because suppressing knowledge is anti-democratic.
As the source says, it's an attack on knowledge that is deeply democratic and therefore an attack on democracy itself. Our agency starts with that commitment to clarity and truth.
Okay, so if we can be hypnotized by false beliefs, as Maltz described, surely we can also be dehypnotized. How do we actively reprogram our own internal gnosis for more freedom, a clearer perspective?
Maltz gives us practical steps based on that core idea. Your nervous system believes what you vividly imagine. Step one is actively questioning those limiting beliefs. Ask yourself, hang on, why do I actually believe I can't do X? Is this based on real facts or just an old assumption, an old program running?
Digging into the why.
Yes. And that process, that critical self-inquiry can stir up this powerful indignation. Maltz tells that story about Alfred Adler realizing his math teacher was wrong about him. That indignation, that realization you've been falsely limited can be a real liberator. It fuels change.
I like that indignation as fuel. Okay, what else? How do we filter all the incoming noise better?
Adopt the motto, it ain't necessarily so. Become a conscious filter. When a message or narrative comes in, pause. Use your rational mind. Is this true? Is it helpful? Does it align with my values? Actively avoid that limbic hijacking, that instant emotional reaction.
Practice discernment before internalizing.
Assert your intellectual sovereignty. And then leverage that amazing quirk of your nervous system, mental practice, visualization.
Because the brain can't tell the difference between real and imagined.
Exactly. Maltz advises. Picture ourselves performing in a certain manner. Create a clear mental image of the self you want to be, the outcome you want. See yourself in the new role daily. You are literally feeding your nervous system the data for the reality you want to create, programming the outcome.
Building new neural pathways for success.
And what about all the negative thoughts, the old patterns? Maltz says don't fight them directly. Instead, actively cultivate positive thoughts, focus on positive memories, desired outcomes. The negative stuff tends to simply evaporate because they're crowded out.
Change the channel in your mind. Focus on what you want to grow.
Exactly.
So if we can do this individually, manage our internal gnosis, deprogram limitations. Can society do something similar? Can we create a new collective gnosis? Maybe embrace that efficiency of inefficiency we talked about earlier.
That's the big hope, isn't it? It brings us back to valuing those constraints on power. Collectively accepting that friction in governance, checks and balances, deliberation isn't a bug. It's the necessary cost of keeping power limited and accountable.
Prioritizing liberty over just speed and efficiency.
Yes. And insisting that when fundamental change is needed, it happens through open, established processes like amendments with broad consensus, not through sneaky interpretive sleight of hand by elites.
So a new collective gnosis would mean understanding that slow can be good, that constraints protect freedom, and that our shared beliefs, even about abstract things like money, are incredibly powerful.
Immensely powerful. It means cultivating new narratives. Maybe reframing money as energy, something that can be consciously directed towards collective well-being, towards productive growth, not just speculation or control.
Which requires education, critical thinking.
Education on conscious media consumption, yeah. Encouraging critical thinking. And maybe listening more closely to those artists, those antennae, helping us all see the hidden ground, the deeper patterns shaping our world. It's about empowering our collective discernment to cut through the noise and consciously shape a better reality.
Wow. We have covered so much today, from systems decaying through subtle sabotage and the weirdness of how money actually works.
To Michelonna's ideas on media stripping away our identity, potentially leading to violence as this desperate search for self.
Exploring how that lack of self-knowing lets the collective shadow out, and how leaders can exploit history to suppress truth.
But also, crucially, exploring tools to get that agency back. Tools rooted in ancient wisdom, modern psychology.
It really feels like the core message is that the main battlefield.
Yeah.
It's often inside our own minds, isn't it? And in our collective beliefs.
I think so. And here's the final thought to leave you with, maybe the most provocative one. If your nervous system truly cannot tell the difference between what you vividly imagine and what's actually happening,
Yeah.
and if our collective beliefs can literally reshape the meaning of rules, the value of money, the very fabric of our society,
Yeah.
then what currently seems impossible might actually become possible. For you personally, or maybe even for society as a whole.
If we do what?
If we genuinely dehypnotize ourselves, if we break free from those limiting beliefs, those passively accepted narratives that have been subtly, maybe unknowingly programmed into us.
So the closing question for you listening is,
Yeah.
what potential gets unlocked when you take conscious control of that inner world? How will you use this understanding, this awareness we've explored today, to become an architect of clarity, of freedom in your own life, in your own sphere of influence?
This deep dive, as always, it's just the start. Keep exploring these ideas. Keep questioning those narratives. Keep noticing the subtle forces. And most importantly, keep applying these insights. Because your conscious engagement, your empowered gnosis, well, that might just be the most powerful force there is.